Hearty good morning to each commissioner. And you normally expect from me, I always like to greet you. This is one of the outstanding commissioners and group of commissioners that we have. And we thank you for being here. And at this time, we will all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have been told that we have a quorum, so Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Ashley, Mr. Hodges,
Here.
Mr. McGraw. Charles City County, Mr. Cota.
Here.
Yay!
Cannot take her in public, I apologize.
Sorry, everybody stop laughing. Okay, stop. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
I'm here remotely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Ms. Haley. Cleveland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Here.
County, Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Davis. Henrico County, Chair Thornton.
Here.
Ms. O'Bannon. New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Present.
Jesus.
Fountain County, Mr. Williams.
Here.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Here.
Dr. Newbill. Delegates, Delegate McQuinn. Senate of Virginia, Senator McClellan. Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Brown. PRPT, Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Brule. Here. EDOT, Mr. Rich. Mr. Mann.
Mark Riblet substituting for Shane Mann today.
Thank you. Virginia Port Authority, Mr. Edwards. Ms. Vick. Ms. Nelson. Here. GRTC, Ms. Tim. Here. Ms. Adams. And RMTA, Ms. Dean. Here. Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call, and we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you so very much. Okay. Again, I welcome each of you here this morning and opening statement for virtual participation, members, Ms. Parson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly for everyone in the room, we do have a number of people attending the meeting, the webinar virtually. It looks like 11 folks are signed on to join us today. I would encourage anyone who is participating as an attendee that there is a Q&A function at the bottom of the webinar screen. If you have questions throughout the meeting and would like to have those entertained by the authority, please use that Q&A function to submit your questions, and we can address them as well as we can. Otherwise, it looks like Mr. Carroll is joining us virtually. We do also know that today is the Governor's Transportation Conference, and we believe that Delegate McQuinn, Senator McClellan, and Mr. Brown are all there attending that and have sent their regrets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parsons, and thank you to all those persons who are with us this morning virtually. And again, thank each of you commissioners who are here this morning. Celebrating Mr. Brown and just all right. Now we go to consideration of the agenda. Is there any consideration of the present agenda? Anyone? Any members?
Mr. Chairman. Last night I got in about 8:30, had a full day, and I saw an email saying that the agenda has been changed from what I had previously reviewed. We have a minute to have staff go over what those changes. Getting it so late, I'd like to have the line item of what those changes are.
Mr. Parker, would you address that?
Yes, sir, absolutely. We apologize for the late distribution. Things have been moving with new information every day. The past 2 weeks, we still try to get the agenda packets out in advance, but sometimes there's additional information. In terms of the actual items on the agenda, they have not changed, but there is more supplemental material that's what was sent last night. So I would bring your attention to item B, the public hearing. We did distribute additional comments that have been received regarding the project list. So that is one of the items in your packet. We wanted to provide an update to the fall on cost estimates. That's item 2A. We also have an updated draft letter for item 2C. There was nothing there previously. We just had the marker on the agenda itself. We do also have, let's see, what else is in here? I believe that may have been everything, Mr. Peterson. It's really, I think the biggest item is an update to the cost estimates for consideration under item 2B. That's the large format table that you have in front of you. There is a lot of information to be covered today, and we'll take care to go through each one and handle any questions or concerns that members have.
Commissioners, remember that you do have these sheets that we'll be looking at, and as we have done in the past, we'll make sure that we address any questions and concerns that you may have. Mr. Peterson, does that satisfy you?
Leave that up to everybody else. I just did not have a chance to review it. I didn't know what we were voting on.
Okay, I think that we will follow the agenda then, and as Mr. Parson said, basic changes come under
Under the committee report.
okay, on the committee report. Go down to approval of the October the 29th Cvta minutes.
Motion to approve, Mr.
Motion has been made and second. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Objection? Okay. And we will say then that, Madam Clerk, that the minutes of the October 29th meeting have been approved. This next period that we are in is called the open public comment period. This is a time when citizens or anyone may address this board on any issues pertaining to the mission of the Cvta. Do we have anyone who is
Mr. Chair, we haven't received any general public comments. We do have public comments pertaining to the public hearing, which is coming up, but otherwise we have not received other comments.
So the chair will recognize those that have been received in print. And there are no other persons to have anything to say with us. We'll move on then. Let's go down to the chairman's report, which is extremely brief, and that is that this meeting today is a meeting that's critically important, talking about distributions of the funds and all of that. And so staffing items would probably be most efficacious to do that as we've been trying to do things in a steadfast way, at a future meeting rather than today's meeting here. And any questions you may have on staffing, you can refer those to Mrs. Heater or Mr. Parsons. Other than that, that's just my report. Vice Chair, did you have anything you wanted to share with us, Mr. Carroll? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm just sorry that I couldn't be there in person. We had the scheduled trip to Florida. I'm glad that I'm at least able to make it remotely. And I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. I won't hold up the meeting anymore. Thank you.
Okay, now we go to the public hearing.
Yes, sir. Maybe before we take action to open the hearing, logistically, anyone who is attending remotely and would like to speak, please note that in the Q&A so that staff can make sure to unmute your mic and make it available. I think that we will maybe we'll monitor the webinar as the hearing takes place. There may be folks that are here in person that want to
Okay.
speak too. Thank you. Mr. Chair, staff recommendation right now is that the public hearing scheduled for today has been open. The public comment period ended yesterday at the close of business. And at this point, staff would recommend that the authority open the public hearing to review the Cvta project list for initial investment of regional revenue funds. And staff is happy to provide a little background on that before soliciting any comments from the public.
Any comments from any of our commissioners as we open this up?
Mr. Chair, will you all be sharing comments from the public comment period? I know it has been open for some time.
Yes, sir. So in the agenda packet, there was a legal size table. This is very small print. It is intended to be reflective of what was advertised 2 weeks ago for the public hearing. We have received a number of comments electronically, and that is also included in your packet. It says Cvta project list FY21 and 22. If anyone around the table does not have it, let me know and staff can make sure it's in front of you. It's a set of 4 comments. These were
What
received.
page is it on in the report? The last page of the
That item
agenda
was
packet.
actually not sent out. That was not sent out in the packet. It was printed this morning. I can email you a copy of it now if you'd like.
Please.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Can we share the screen and show it that way at this point, please? Bear with us, Mr. Carroll. Apologies.
Just 1 second, but we do have Louise Lockett Gordon online who would like to give a public comment. So if we could. While I'm trying to get the screen up with the written comments.
All right, Ms. Lockett Gordon, you should be able to unmute and speak to the authority at this point. Please state your name and affiliation.
I'm sorry, I think I missed it when I was connecting, but are you ready for my comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Louise Lockett Gordon, Director of Bike Walk RVA with Sports Backers. Thank you all for having me this morning. I just wanted to say that we are, of course, very supportive of including the fall line in the authority's initial regional investment. This 43-mile multi-use trail will cross 2 planning districts and connect 7 localities across our region. And we think it will not only be a game-changing active transportation spine for our region, but will also contribute to the positive health impacts, shifting more daily trips to walking and biking, and will give travelers yet one more reason to come visit our region. So thank you for including this, and we definitely support including the fall line in the authority's regional investment.
Okay, we thank you for the comments.
All right, Mr. Carroll, are you able to see that?
I have emailed it to him and we were able to get it on the screen.
So we are sharing on the screen 4 comments that were received during the public comment period. Ms. Virginia Coles, Laura Gorin, Sam Miller, and Carrie Miller all submitted comments in support of the fall line and the projects that were advertised. I don't believe any of them are live with us today.
No.
Okay. But those are submitted as received during the public comment period. Mr. Chair, I'd also ask if you wanted to recognize anyone in the room that might be with us to share public.
Yeah. Are there any other persons in the room who would like to share any of the comments during this period? If not, we do accept the comments of the 4 persons who lived in, and the authority is appreciative of that you've taken the time to express your point of view.
So at this point, staff would recommend closing the public hearing. We do have action on this item under the committee reports.
Can I get Commissioner to put that up? Closing.
Move to close the public comment period, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Second.
Any questions? Motion been made, properly second, to close the public hearing. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, okay, the hearing part is closed at this point. Okay, Mr. Parsons. Okay, so now we go to committee reports. The first one is Cvta Finance Committee update. And that's be given by our good friend, the mayor, Mayor Sony.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, commissioners. It's another great day to be with you all today, and I hope everyone enjoyed their time with friends and family for the Thanksgiving holiday. But we are back to work again on another Friday morning. My report is short, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee has been working diligently over the last few months, but today we come with you with only a few details. And for those details, I'm going to ask Mr. Parsons and Ms. Heater to provide the remainder of the report. Mr. Parsons has a piece. He's going to handle the revenue projections part, and then I'm going to ask that Ms. Heater handle the financial report. Ms. Heater.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Stoney. Members of the authority, I'll just briefly call your attention to the documents that are included in the packet for the financial report. This is the status of the revenues and the expenditures that were reviewed by the Finance Committee and recommended for acceptance. Always with thanks to the Chesterfield County team for preparing the information and providing it. I did want to also share with the committee, or the full authority rather, that the committee did have a lengthy discussion at the last meeting with regard to financial advisory services and the status of the request for proposals that had been issued earlier this fall. The committee has charged the Finance Directors Working Group with a new task to identify recommended debt policies for the committee to review. So those will be coming back before the committee prior to making a final decision with regard to the proposals that are received. So just wanted to give a brief status update on that particular item. Mayor Stoney, I don't know if you want to add to sort of more of the volume of that discussion, but that is where we are on that particular.
Yeah, all I was going to ask if you could briefly, could you brief the full body on the discussion and request for proposals for the financial advisory services as well?
Yeah, I think my impression from the discussion is that really before we make a decision as an authority with regard to who will be the service provider, it was important for the authority to establish its own parameters for how it wants to approach investment in debt and project financing. And so this assignment to the Finance Directors Working Group will really be able to come back and be able to help the Finance Committee bring recommendations forward to the full authority in setting those parameters. I would suspect that we will be largely drawing upon the existing debt policies that your localities have, and so we'll be requesting that. Finance directors will be making a recommendation to the full Finance Committee and then a recommendation to the authority with regard to establishing what that policy might look like for this particular commission. In light of the projects that we know to be coming down the line and candidate for prioritization.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? The financial policies, we're delaying bringing on board a financial advisor, is that correct?
In a matter of speaking, I think that the committee wanted to delay final decision for a month or so that we could have a little bit more guidance when that financial advisor is brought on board.
Okay, so if I understood you correctly, we're going to be looking to our finance directors around the region to come forward with recommendations for the financial policies for this authority.
Yes, sir. They will be providing the documentation from the respective jurisdictions, your debt policies at the local level as a foundation. And then based on the work that they've already been doing in conjunction with the TAC and identifying and understanding the magnitude of candidate projects for prioritization, we'll come forward with a recommendation as to how those debt limits might look relative to the authority.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a follow-up question. I'm not sure the financial policies, for example, in Powhatan County are going to be a straight line connection with an authority. Are we going to be looking at what the other authorities have for their financial policies?
Yes. Our finance working group does include members of not just the 9 jurisdictions, but representatives from GRTC and RMTA. So we have.
I was talking more about Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads.
Yes, I apologize. I take that for granted. We rely, I apologize, yes. We rely on the documentation that we collect and in collaboration with them regularly to inform the documentation that we put together here.
Because I'm going to be looking more to what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Understood.
You know, as opposed to what I'm doing in Powhatan County as a jurisdiction versus what we're going to be doing as an authority, particularly when it comes to leveraging dollars.
Understood. Yes, I apologize. I always assume that what's in my head is in yours, and that's not the right way to do that. So.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if I may elaborate from that last Finance Committee meeting. What Ms. Heater has said, I'm going to try and make this a little shorter and simpler. It really came down to the finance committee feels like we need to make a recommendation to the full CVTA as to who this financial advisor is that we should select. But we felt like we also needed to have some kind of recommendation for a debt policy to bring to the board simultaneously, that the two go hand in hand.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay.
Ms. Eater, you've completed your part of the report, correct?
Unless there are any questions about the documents that are included in the packet, yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Eater. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the items in your packet is a table that has gone through review by both of the technical committee and the finance committee. It's labeled revenue forecast based on VDOT's December 21 projections. We are looking at here is the recommendation from the finance director's working group and the finance committee, as well as the TAC, to establish the projected regional revenue for a 6-year regional budget from FY 22 to 27. It is highlighted slightly in yellow to bring your attention to it. The total amount, as you can see, it grows from year to year, starting in FY 22 at 66.13 million and grows to 76.71 million in 2027. For a total projection of 426.86 million over that 6-year period. The recommendation at this point from TAC and Finance is to approve the 6-year regional budget. This will allow us to use those numbers as our baseline as project allocations are discussed both today and in the coming months for the remaining years, FY 23 to 26, 27. And this will allow us to have a foundation. It does not set this in stone as projections are redone. We expect them to be actually updated later this month. We think that as those numbers are refined, we can bring those back to the authority for consideration again. But at this point, we do not have a baseline revenue projection, and we wanted to make sure that we take action to establish that before spending decisions are made. So that is an action item, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to have a motion to, on behalf of the Finance Committee, to approve the 6-year regional budget from FY 22 to FY 27.
And we really, on the agenda, this is B. This is, okay. Yeah, this is, okay. All right. Action item here is to approve the 6-year regional budget from FY 22 to FY 27. And have a formal roll call.
Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
I'll second it. Second.
From the committee, it doesn't require a second.
It doesn't require it.
Charles City County, Mr. Cota.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chair Thornton. Henrico, Chair Thornton, okay, thank you. County, Ms. Page. Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
And then Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call for that item.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much for that report. We'll go to 2, CBTA Technical Advisory Committee update. Mr. Parsons.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can start this off. If you recall from our last meeting, October 29th, there was discussion regarding The amount of funding recognized as available for Powhatan, Goochland, New Kent, and Charles City counties. And we had, I think Mr. Carroll might have raised this, we had an incorrect amount listed where we were only considering FY21 available funding. We have adjusted that and made available and asked for a response from those 4 jurisdictions on any additional project commitments that they would like to include in our overall project list. We received feedback from all 4. Goochland County has asked to adjust the amount of proposed CVTA funds for the I-64 at Ashland Road interchange. And it was adjusted by about $300,000. That is reflected, and I guess the larger 11 by 17 stapled piece of information that was provided to you reflects that change. In addition to that, we also included in that page, and all 4 pages there, you can see the light green shaded areas. We know that decisions that this authority makes have to be based on data-driven, process-oriented tools. So we have included the scoring that was outlined in the framework, the scoring framework for regional project selection. And this is included here to show a project benefit score and an overall ranking for each of the projects under consideration in this initial list. Everything qualifies. The goal in the legislation was to make sure that you have the best information in front of you to make project allocation decisions. And we believe now that you do have that information, including the scoring and ranking. This does not, I believe we discussed it on numerous occasions, Mr. Gregory, that this does not tie you to any certain order or priority ranking, but that you have the ability now with the information in front of you to make the best decision that you need to make for the region. Mr. Chair, I believe other than those 2 items, unless Mr. Ure has other information to add, this is the latest information now based on the feedback we got in the public hearing and the additional requests from Goochland County and the scoring that's provided in the spreadsheet. This is our candidate project list for consideration of support by FY21 and FY22 regional CVTA funds.
Commissioner, you've heard that report, so if there are any questions, this is the time for it. Clarification.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question from Mr. Parsons. We have the State Mill project being shown that's coming out of the year 1 monies. We had an additional amount that showed up for the second year.
Yes.
Okay. My understanding is we haven't committed to a project for those monies as of this time, but we have the option of doing that. Is that correct?
That is our understanding. Mr. Ure, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, but I think at the technical committee, the discussion was had that there is a balance for the 3 counties excluding Goochland that would still be available for future allocation based on the
inclusion of year 2, which wasn't included at a previous meeting.
Yes, sir.
Got corrected. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to make sure that those monies that are not committed in this project will still be available for a project that we'll be bringing forward in the future.
Yes, sir. And if that is the direction that the authority wishes to take, staff is prepared to keep that tally, so to speak, and understand where everything lies for years moving forward.
Mr. Parsons, or I would hope someone could explain the gap that's in the larger chart. I'm particularly interested in section 7C2, which just what the gap means.
Yes, sir.
I looked at the last number, and it doesn't seem to, the gap that's in our letter, so draft letter, which will be addressed later.
Mr. Barnes is going to explain now is the gap, okay, for those commissioners.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Hodges. This is what I'm getting ready to get into is the bulk of the work that the technical committee, we have a fall line working group that has started meeting this week, have been discussing for the last week and a half. And I'll start with, this table has 3 footnotes. So I'd like to step through each one if that's okay with the chair.
Yes, that's fine.
The first item there is it's listed as the total estimate, and it's about midway down the table. And that's item with footnote 1. This is the original amount that VDOT provided months back for consideration in the fall line discussion. This is an estimate that has been prepared and validated by VDOT staff to use as the baseline for any discussion moving forward. This is, I believe, the numbers that we were sharing at our October 29th meeting. Since that date, we had some time to think more, and the technical committee understood that these estimates are based on 2021 dollars, Mr. Riblett, and that may not be the most realistic way to present our case to the state for funding assistance. So the next column to the right is labeled future value estimate. And this reflects an additional burden of 3% inflation on those original numbers projected out to the year 2027. So there's an escalation there to provide a sense of realism to the actual construction right away and PE dates for these segments. The next item over, labeled committed funding, and Mr. Hodges, this is, I think, where your question might come in, is a realization of any other funding that may have been received for these individual segments. I think in particular, a smart scale allocation will change things for each of these segments. Before I come back to this, the next item over is the gap. The gap is the remaining amount, the remaining need for each segment that we have identified as outstanding.
Can you clarify that? You were saying a smart scale allocation will change, or I'm just not following exactly what you're.
Yes, sir. I know. It's so I think to come to, as an illustration, and Mr. Ure and I talked about this at length yesterday. If you look at Mr. Hodges' item 7C2 on the second page, it is the Town of Ashland Chickahominy River Crossing. That project has received smart scale funding, or is identified for smart scale funding, and that is shown is committed of 4.98 million. That number is actually higher than the inflation number that is listed just to the left, which shows a red number in the gap column. Anytime, and that may not have been the best illustration, but anytime there was a gap number that is shown in the positive, so to speak, it's not a need, it's actually what looks like a surplus. The project itself may be bigger than just fall line. So additional funding commitments may include other things that would not qualify as a fall line project. So it shows up as a surplus, but it's not really that number. Mr. Ure, I don't know if you want to try and restate that again. I understand this.
Let me take a different stab at that. So, for example, the project that Mr. Parsons mentioned, it was funded through Smart Scale, as you know. And we had a very thoroughly vetted estimate as part of the Smart Scale project application. So that's the number that reflects the higher value here. So when VDOT went through, updated the entirety of the fall line segments, they did a higher level planning estimate. So as a result of differences in the way the estimating was done, the level it was done, there's a discrepancy in the funding. Based on conversations we had at TAC and at the fall line working group, the consensus was that we should focus on the more accurate estimates, the more detailed estimates that have been done, and as a result, tend to be higher numbers than some of the planning level estimates that are showing up in these different line items. So as a result, that creates that gap of the funding gap of I think it's 9.2 million. So bottom line is when we actually get closer to building the projects, the estimates are going to continue to get refined as we get more detailed engineering. The more detailed cost estimates now are the ones we're defaulting to, recognizing that they can still change. So we kind of took a conservative approach to make sure that the funding ask of the state, it fully reflects the kind of the most conservative estimates.
And I think, I see Mr. Peterson, I think one thing to note is, as I mentioned, the future value is projected out to 2027. I think everybody around the table certainly hopes that we're able to get most of this work done before that date. So, but as Mr. Year mentioned, we want it to be as conservative as possible when considering a request for assistance.
So can I take a shot at trying to list this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, and again, I'm not gonna look at projects. I know that we're funding individual projects as opposed to the entirety of the trail, but the goal is the entirety of the trail. The initial estimate was $251 million is what it would cost to build the trail. We recognized those were 2019, 2020 estimates. So we adjusted for inflation and more refined. So that gets us to the 299. This is called 300 million, lawyer math. Of which of that 300 million, we're saying only 72 million is currently committed. Most of that being small scale and local dollars. And so the funding need based upon these revised estimates is 236.
Yes.
That's what we need to get the project done, to complete it. Now, the reality is that may be inflated. Hopefully it's inflated. And so the question that this body will have to address is how much of that 236 roughly are we willing to commit? And of course, it will be allocated via projects, but how much of the 236 are we willing to commit? That's the question that we'll be confronted with. Is that it, sir?
That's good plain speak. And that 236 does not consider any decisions made today.
Mr. Hart, was your question answered?
Yes, it poses another question, if I might ask. So if we adopt this, we're not at the gap that Mr. Brown, I think, described. So we're identifying the gap, we're not filling the gap in plain speak.
Mr. Chair, I think at this point in the agenda, we are identifying the projects and adopting that as the official.
I see that.
The official candidate project list.
Great, thank you, Mr.
And Mr. Parson and Mr. Ewell, also I'm thinking also the TAC group and the other group, you did take into consideration what the whole body has been husbanding for some time, that is flexibility. We want to make sure that we adhere to that. So that was done.
Yes, sir. Well, we want to address that now. So the approach to the funding plan for the Fall Line Trail was to basically have a block of funding that through the working group and TAC process we can do a spending plan based on when different segments are going to be ready, based on schedules, based on project delivery. So rather than allocating to specific segments that then ties the money to that particular segment, we want the flexibility to move the money as different segments are ready to move forward.
I want all the commissioners to remember that we had talked about the flexibility. I think I saw Ms. Page's hand first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just so I'm clear, the funds for the projects that we have here, I kept hearing you say that it's the fall line and some other projects. So our other projects, i.e. if you need the trail, but you have a section of a bridge that needs repair for the trail, is that the other project?
Ms. Page, for clarity, the other projects are the projects in New Kent, Charles City, Goochland, and Powhatan that are on the last page.
Okay. But that is, okay, I thought you were just talking about this. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is just, I think it's already been answered, but clarification. So every leg of the fall line has been escalated 6 years at this point. So we've got leeway there because hopefully we're going to be building a lot of these lakes before that and have less inflation. Is that correct?
That's the goal, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I just kind of want to bring us back to sort of where we started. So appreciate Mr. Brown's plain speak. If we're looking at how much of the 236 million, I feel like we started down this trail, pun intended, saying that we would look to commit 2 years of the Cvta funding. Simple math says that number 236 is 3.5 years of full Cvta funding. So are we saying that is the question then, are we willing to commit more than 2 years of the regional funds to this?
Are we doing the regional funds? Or are we doing the sections of the region that the trail line affects?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, to address Mr. Spinar's question, the discussion has always been that we were focusing now on FY21 and 22 funds. And there would be a commitment of a discussion of a possible commitment of those regional funds to the fall line. We understand that there is not enough in those 2 years to fill this entire gap. And that's the next item on the agenda.
Other questions?
Just point of information, and I don't know, maybe this is the next item on the agenda. I think the contemplation is that other resources could be brought to bear, Mrs. Spodow, to help close the gap that would remain after the 2-year allocation from the Cvta. There's no guarantee, but that's the thought, and that there are other state resources, as this will be a resource, an asset of the state, of the Commonwealth at the end of the day, that maybe that can help close the gap.
Thank you.
And so, Mr. Chair, I have a question, but I do have something to say about the Fall Line Trail. And I'm going to tell you, coming from New Kent County, where all of you that can hear my voice understand my desire and their desires of County 564 Wyden. I have been faced with many questions as to why I would support a walking and bicycle trail to the tune of $236 million. When we have relentlessly used our resources in the county to get people safely through 29 miles of New Kent County. I can tell you, sir, it has caused much thought. My position is that I am indeed a team player. I understand understand the importance of this trail to many. However, I want the committee to be very clear that also there is a need for other transportation issues that are of higher importance or concerns for many. And when I say that, because many tax dollars are going into this. So I would ask this committee to be absolutely good stewards of the funding and to know that on behalf of us, that it is not lost in me, and I will not let it be lost in you, that we need to widen I-64 through New Kent County.
Ms. Page, you have been an advocate for the persons that you represent. You've been an advocate for Cvta, and each commissioner will recall that at the beginning of this, we use the analogy of family. And in families, there are many different members. And so what we have to do though is to make sure we solidify family.
Absolutely.
And part of that solidification is that there are some projects that you say, okay, I go for it. I won't go for that so much, but I support it. And this is a process. And I think what the commissioners need to understand, and the public who's listening, and I want to first of all say that this page part is on target. But the CVJ's mission is even longer and in the future. And our job is to make sure we prepare the best transportation system for this region. And the thinking is right now, hopefully, that we're heading that direction. But we need to hear from each commissioner how you feel about it. You don't want this thing that they always got to feel good and that you know that everybody has to see it the same way. That's not how this commission is. And I appreciate that. And I want each member to know that hey, you have to represent your group, but also we have a new body now we never had before. Probably in a perfect world, 20 years ago, we should have had it, but we didn't. But we have it now, and you're a part of that. And your presence here is to make it even better. And that's what Ms. Page is talking about. That's what Mr. Ure, Mr. Parsons, and that's what the chairman and the vice chair are talking about. So we hope that you will be sensitive to that. Thank you, Ms. Page, for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any others before we move on to C? Oh, yeah, action on this. We need some action on this. So any other presentations or comments before we have? The action here is to approve candidate projects to be supported for FY21 and FY22 for the CVTA regional funds.
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, has been motioned and has been approved, so let's do our voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Should we do that? Roll call? Yeah, the chair reverses that. Let's do this by roll call vote. Madam Chair. It should go on record forever.
Aye.
Charles City County, Mr. Cota.
Reluctantly, aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Richland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chair Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes the roll call for that item.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair. Point of clarification, and the reason I paused a little for the vote, because I just wanted to make sure everything's clear.
I can't hear.
I'm sorry, the reason I paused for a second before the vote is because I want to make sure everyone was clear on what we voted on. Because the way the motion is written in the agenda is not quite explicit as to what was articulated. And I don't know if Mr. Gregory can you clarify to the body what we just voted on?
Try. I might rely on Mr. Parsons to help me with that. I believe what was just approved was the large format document before you that you all were discussing concerning the Capitol Trail, I'm sorry, not the Capitol Trail, Fall Line Trail projects and the other regional projects that were discussed that are on the back page of that document. I believe that's what.
But was it intended that the dollars allocated, the funding attached to each of those projects be likewise? That's what I was pausing on.
You're looking for an appropriation.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And I don't think that motion was necessarily adequate.
I think, yeah, approving the projects and appropriating the funds to pay for those projects, I think you're right, are two different things. So that I would suggest if the authority board would like to follow through on that, a subsequent motion would be necessary to appropriate funds towards those projects. And I would suggest that they be for FY 21 and 22 in the amount of $113,871.73 pursuant to, which is addressed on the document labeled revenue forecasts based on VDOT's December 2021 projections.
Chairman, if I may clarify, my motion was to approve the document that's before us. It had nothing to do with the allocation of funds to fund the gap. It's approval of the estimate that's been given to us today.
And then my only question would be, there a need to do that? Technically, I guess my question. If there was only an estimate.
I guess, I think the staff was looking for approval from tell me if I'm wrong, to have a working basis to go forward. Is that?
Mr. Chair, we had the public hearing earlier in the meeting to review this candidate list project, did not take action because of the additional information I shared at the beginning of the committee report. So I think staff's recommendation is yes, we should officially approve this as a candidate list of projects for CVTA regional funds. And then, as Mr. Gregory mentioned, take additional action to actually appropriate regional dollars to this candidate list.
Someone put that into a motion so we can.
I believe, my understanding is Mr. Peterson has done that to take the first step of approving the candidate. Yes, sir.
I agree, that was my second.
Okay.
So then I think it would be appropriate to move, I'm gonna see if I can do this, that the CVTA allocate the amount of, is it 104.5 million?
No, sir. The total amount is $113,871.73. And that includes the entire list of candidate projects.
Right, so let me see if I can say this. So that we allocate the, whatever number that Mr. Parson just read towards the funding of the projects that were previously approved by the CVTA. And such that the dollars allocated to components of the trail be allocated according to the advice and guidance of the Technical Advisory Committee for funding, and that such committee will inform or advise the formal body of such allocation once applied.
Did y'all get that?
No. What we're saying is we're gonna take 113 million. We're gonna apply to this list, but because the committee asked that we not allocate dollars exactly, for example, 1A, that we're funding 1A through 4B, because they may be ready out of order. That the committee will have the discretion to advise us as to exactly the order in which the funding will be allocated, right? Because we have 236 million in project need, and they didn't ask it, they didn't tell us exactly where the dollars are going to go. So they're saying, we gave you the list. When the projects are ready, as they become ready, we will allocate the dollars to those projects, but it won't necessarily be in sequence. Mr. Ewers, that's what you asked for.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner, I just wanted to say we have Doug McQuinn now who has joined us, okay?
Mr. Chair, I think one additional comment on Mr. Brown's points. I think it is safe to say that based on the candidate project list and the 113 million total, that it could be stated that 5.246 million are carved out for Goochland, Powhatan, New Canaan, and Charles City, and the remaining 104.5 or whatever that balance is, it could be committed to the fall line, which would be clarity in terms of what the actual commitment. Right.
The 113 is the first 2 years.
Yes, sir.
That's right. Does that, if I may ask a question on that, also the potential that goes back to the finance committee of leveraging some of these funds? Is what we can do. So, yes, sir. I'm interested. To commit it to a straight cash, 113 million might be a little premature.
That's clarity.
I concur. I'm just dealing with what they asked us to do. Right. I mean, so I guess the question to the
chair, the chair would like to, I think you bring up a good point, Mr. Brown. Chair would have a motion on the clear side about the appropriation of the funds. That's the part that I think that we have some consternation about. We've already selected the funds, we selected the projects. So now it's out there to be appropriated. So the chair would entertain a motion that will handle the part about the funding as it is given to, as you see on the chart, and then the amount of funding that will go toward the Fall Line Trail. I think that's what the gist of what Mr. Brown has been requesting, clarity, so that they won't overlap, funds will overlap.
Mr. Chairman. Chairman, will pound the table once again. You know where I'm at.
Yes, sir.
113 million in projects, and you're not showing that remaining amount for year 2 in Powhatan County. I want to make sure that money doesn't just disappear.
Yes, sir. I misspoke when I made the comment a minute ago. It wasn't 5.4 or whatever I mentioned. It's a little bit more than that, and I wanted to make sure that I provide that right information.
Chairman.
Is it on the agenda to take action on this item at this time? Or is it just on the agenda to take action?
We're taking action, Mr. Cota, on the agenda item we've just discussed. We've already passed. Now we will bring clarity about how the funds are to be appropriated toward those.
That's the point. That was my question. Is that on the agenda to take action on today? I don't think it is. That's not on the agenda, sir. What's on the agenda is to approve the project selection timeline, not the appropriations. So, I mean, I'm just curious here.
I think, for the committee to do its work appropriately, steadfastly, and since we are sensitive and know what the figures are for the projects, I don't see any reason for us to hold that in abeyance.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your comment. I think that's why I paused, because if you read the agenda item at the CTB, when we say we're going to select projects, we're allocating funds. So the list doesn't matter except and then it has a dollar figure attached to it. So the fact that we selected a project list without tying funding to it, to me, is kind of, that's just, happy talk, right? It's the thing that matters is what are you funding, right? Because, and so I interpreted that we were voting on selecting projects that we were going to fund, not simply selecting the list. So my interpretation of the agenda item was exactly that we were doing appropriations, not that we were going to be actually, and that's why I paused to think about what did we do, because we didn't necessarily attach funding to the projects.
The chair is waiting for a motion.
I understand the sort of consternation about what is on the agenda. Understanding that the action is recommended to be taken on the 113 million today. I can certainly see the action item listed here as motion to approve candidate projects to be supported by. That is consistent with an appropriation because you can't do anything. Supporting the projects is through the appropriation. So I would recommend an additional motion to appropriate the funds, but I believe that item could be said to be included on the agenda. I don't think it would require an agenda amendment to recognize that as being part of the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory, for that explanation.
Mr. Chairman, have we not previously already approved the first 2 years of regional funding for this purpose? We have not.
No, I think so.
Mr. Chair, in Mr. Peterson's question, I think that the authority has over numerous meetings expressed a desire and has charged staff and the technical advisory group with devising a plan to make this possible. And that effort and those discussions are culminating today in the request before you to actually take the action to appropriate the funds. So I think the discussion has been intended to lead toward actually taking the action to assign the 113 million to the 4 projects in the jurisdictions and the excess assignments there, and then the outline assignment, which then gives certainty of the communication that is before the board in the next item. So I think we're building on each of these steps to be able to make sure that no communications are happening out of order. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The motion out there. I
don't know. It's the rest of that thing.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you're looking for a motion.
Yes,
to
the
go
chair
forward.
is, chair's open to a motion.
I will make the motion that we move forward with funding the projects that are on the project list. I will briefly state that the Fall Line Trail is 104,457,478. The rural project representing a total of 9,413,595 for a total amount of 113,871,073. I'll make that as a motion that we move forward with these funding amounts for the projects that are here before us today.
Second the motion.
Okay, you've heard the motion and it has been seconded. Let's have a roll call vote.
Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Charles City County, Mr. Cota.
Aye.
Chesterfield County Vice Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Richland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chair Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page. Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney. House of Delegates, Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes roll call for that item.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners, for that. Now we go to C. And each of you, I think, has a copy of that letter. It's a letter that's been updated to the government. Boston, briefly, you want to just mention that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you. At the October 29th meeting, the authority sent a tentative placeholder notification to the governor regarding the action that took place today. And what we wanted to do following today's meeting is to update that information with a request for assistance with the fall line balance. What that means is that this letter outlines the commitment made today of $104.5 million to the fall line. It uses the candidate project list, which was adopted this morning, to understand the full implications of inflation and the remaining needs for those fall line segments, to identify $132.1 million in remaining need. And that is following the understanding of the revised total fall line project costs of $300 million, the regional funds commitment this morning, other committed funding of $72.6 million for a remaining need, as I said, of $132.1 million. If approved to send this letter today, we'll ask the chair to sign the letter and move forward, communicating the authority's request to the governor's office, as well as the General Assembly at the urging of Senator McClellan and Delegate McQuinn.
Commissioner, you heard the redaction of the letter, and I have read it, and you heard it. So unless you have any doubts about that, I will sign that letter.
We would like action.
Okay, so let's have action on that. Let's go to the roll call.
I'll second.
Motion made properly second. All those in favor, vote aye.
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 Opposed?
Abstain, Mr. Chairman, because I think I'm going to be recipient of this letter, so I'm going to abstain on this. Just to be accepted.
I assume, Mr. Chair,
Delegate McQuinn?
yes, I hear my colleague abstaining, Carlos. I guess with it going to the General Assembly and the governor, I assume that I should take that position as well.
Thank you, Delegate McQuinn. Okay, all right, moving on. Okay, now the next item for action will be 6-year projection selection approval timeline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is something that has made its way through all the advisory committees. I believe that everyone should have a color green copy of this schedule. This is a timeline that started, I believe, at the TAC and was reviewed and approved by the Finance Committee. But it essentially sets up all of the scheduled meetings of the authority, the Finance Committee, the Technical Committee, and staff responsibilities through the month of June of 2022, so that we are able to continue forward and take action, not just on what was considered today for FY 21 and 22, but the remaining 4 years, 23 through 26, of project application, selection, and approval for regional funding. It also includes a tie-in to the Smart Scale process, which is beginning in March of 2022. And we know that Cvta regional funds will play a role in Smart Scale applications. We've talked a lot about leveraging, and this kind of sets us up so that we are able to have a schedule to follow to make that a possibility for each of the jurisdictions around the table as they consider smart scale applications and other applications that might be available. What we're asking today is to take the committee recommendation and just make this an official project process for the authority as a whole to follow for the next 6 months.
Okay, commissioners, you heard that. Are there any questions, concerns that you have about this before we take action on it? Any questions, anyone?
Mr. Chairman. Second.
Okay, this item has been seconded and approved. So at this time, we have a roll call vote for the 6-year project selection and approval timeline for projects for the Cvta.
Mr. Chair, Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
City County, Mr. Cota.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Richland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chair Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page. Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
House of Delegates, Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes the roll call for that item.
Okay, Madam Clerk, that has been done. Okay. Last item for business is the Fall Line Working Group, Mr. Ewell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So real briefly, the Fall Line Working Group is a working group coming out of the Cvta TAC. It includes the 5 member jurisdictions that directly benefit from the Fall Line, as well as VDOT and Cvta staff. We had our first meeting this week. We anticipate our second meeting will be probably mid-January. The purpose of that group is to work through the spending plans, schedules, and project delivery for the various segments of the Fall Line as we previously discussed. So unless there's any questions, that's kind of summary for that working group effort.
Any questions to Mr. Ewell about this group here? Anyone? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is now we're down to Cvta member comments. Mr. Hodges.
Mr. Chairman, this is a significant day for the region. It's a significant action this group has taken, and I hope it gets the media attention that it deserves. I do hope that we also take efforts to clarify where this line is. And there are some details I noticed in the comments that one of the public hearing, one of the folks was very happy that the Fall Line Trail had gone across the Manchester Bridge instead of the Teapot Bridge. And that's good, but if you go to Sports Backers and look at the map that they have, they still show the old alignment. So hopefully we'll not only celebrate what we've accomplished here, but also clarify where it is.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Hodges. Other commissioners, any comments?
Mr. Chair. I would just like to take the opportunity to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and safe holiday season on behalf of the beautiful county of New Kent.
You're so good at what you do. I'm taking notes.
All right, Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I just want to remind members that the virtual participation that has been authorized under the emergency declaration put into place by the city of Richmond is coming to an end, as my understanding, as of the end of this month, December 31st. So the ability to participate in these meetings virtually will be based upon Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2. So that flexibility is to participate virtually is going to be somewhat much more limited going forward than it has been. Up to now, people have been fairly generally able to participate virtually. But that's because of that emergency declaration, but that's not going to be effective after the end of this month. Okay, for members. Members of the public, the meetings will continue to be streamed live, and public participation will still be facilitated by the virtual format of the meeting via YouTube and the web access. But members themselves, if you need to participate virtually, you can continue to do so under the Freedom of Information Act for a temporary or permanent disability, or for a family member's medical condition. But that needs to be enunciated to the chairman ahead of time and approved by the authority. Also, you can participate virtually because of a personal matter if you identify with specificity the nature of the personal matter. But under those conditions, members can only do that for 2 meetings or 25% of the meetings held per calendar year of the public body. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to discuss that with you offline or individually and to guide all the members through that if there's a need. But just be aware, virtual participation will be limited going forward after the end of the month, unless some action is taken by city council. The mayor also has certain authority, corroborate or under city council's ordinance, but I don't believe any action is going to be taken under that authorization. So just be advised. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has.
Any questions for Mr. Gregory? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as your chair, I want to thank you for your support of this organization. And you'll come to these meetings. You know, I always say about meetings, all of us have so many things to do, but you come here. And allow me to say this too. For Alicia Vagnacton, Feliz Navidad, Joyeux Noel. And I'm saying that in a sense for all of you and your families to have a Merry Christmas, have a safe Christmas, and let us return next year, which is not far off, so we can carry this vessel forward. And we would not been able to do what we've done without your participation. For that, I say to you, I thank you for that. And my word for that is merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Best holidays.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Happy holidays to all.
Sure.
Happy holidays.
Sure.